Hey, what's going on, guys? Hope everybody had a fantastic Christmas. Really good break for me personally. Hopefully, everyone shares the same enthusiasm. It's just nice to kind of get away from the charts, be with family. I just got back today. We stayed an extra day, so I apologize. I should have gotten this out yesterday. But yeah, just hope everyone enjoyed the break. We got a couple more days of trading. We got Monday, Tuesday, and then we have another day off with New Year's, so another short week, unfortunately. But I don't know. I kind of like it like this. It's just nice to kind of peep back in and check daily charts and kind of just let things play out. Should all kind of expect, of course, kind of going into the inauguration, some volatility in terms of, in my opinion, it's going to be downside, but it's just about finding relative strength, relative weakness, and kind of just playing off of that. If you guys are, obviously, a lot of you guys are, I'll probably post this on YouTube, so some of you guys may not be, but Roku has been something I've been talking about for a long time. We've caught multiple iterations of this trade. And just unfortunately, I had those January 17th contracts that I started roughly in this low here. It did kind of stop me out, right? I did say I was kind of hold this until 77, with 77 being this gap back here from February, and that was going to be my risk for the trade. I was just in like a spotty area where I didn't have connection. I was on my phone. And you guys can clearly see on Friday here, it wicked down pretty aggressively, and I just closed it out thinking it wouldn't get back above. Lo and behold, it just hit this gap here where this red line is, and it closed right back above 77. Just unfortunate, right? And if we take a look at the weekly, still looks really healthy in my opinion. This kind of looks like an SOS. I talk about SOS slash LPS all the time for like a Wyckoff perspective. This still looks like an SOS that absorbed high at 77 from this range here, plus the gap. Still looks like it's now holding a support. So that's very, very important. Weekly, once again, from a harmonic perspective, harmonic breakout here on this weekly. In the last three sessions now on the weekly, look really healthy, right? I mean, this one had a little bit of an uptick. You guys can see this the week of December 16th had a slight uptick in volume, but a nice lower wick here. And this one just closed right on 77. So this chart still looks good. I think the play here, guys, honestly, is just to get some time behind it. I don't see how this one doesn't work out. I'm not giving a guarantee. Obviously, risk management still is very important. 77 should still be risk, but I think I can go into either June or March's. I think June would probably be the best option, depending on open interest, and really just risking that Friday low, right, from the 27th. This was like the last major gap at 75.69, which I'll just make it like a blue line, so it's pretty easy to find. But yeah, I think that's going to be kind of the risk. Obviously, ads against 77, and then risk being below 75.69. But overall, this chart's still very much one of my favorites. ARKK, if we take a look at this, still looks good as well. If we take a look at the weekly, it didn't quite retest 53.86, which is kind of like our jump the creek breakout. Once again, very clean resistance. It did slightly pull back like November 11th and the 18th, the week of those weekly candles there, obviously. Hasn't retested it structurally just yet. I don't know if it has to, though. I mean, this chart still looks good. I think a lot of these names are just kind of letting the EMAs catch up to them. You guys know I'm not much of an EMA guy, but hey, they do have a purpose, obviously identifying trend, and this is caught up really nicely to the weekly 9. And I still think that this continues much higher. I think ARK can definitely go up to like 70. I don't know. It's somewhere in this general range, right? If we go out to the monthly, you guys can see it's not like a clear-cut level. This is just clearly a stage one, and then it clearly broke out. It's definitely just going to start to trend up. Maybe there's a gap up here. I'm not too sure on ARKK. I don't even see one off the top of my head. But yeah, and that's probably what I would say, right? I mean, kind of in this progression gap here. I mean, the gap would be like somewhere around this area. I don't know, like 67 to 70, just that general range. I don't know why I deleted that. But yeah, Roku still looks good. Just wanted to mention that really quickly. Just my fault. Once again, just spotty internet. I stopped out when I shouldn't have. I should have let the daily time frame / the weekly play out, especially knowing too that it was like a shorter week. I should have been a little bit more flexible on those, but I don't think it's the worst thing because I did have January 17th. Time was getting a little crunch there, and those were down a little bit. So yeah, June's will probably be the one. Still looking for like a $90 call. I know technical target is right around 94.50, which would be the fulfillment of the gap, but I think just a 90C, right, kind of going towards for this high up here, so a higher high, something like this, right, if we can kind of pop out, get a higher low, and trend up towards this spot here, I think we can comfortably trim and then let the rest kind of ride into 90 and maybe 94.5. So that's kind of the goal for this one. Moving on to MU, I have not added into this one yet, guys. I know I keep getting a lot of questions about this one. I'm just playing it safe, right? There's a lot of different scenarios that could play out here. Obviously, I still have the 5 of the June contracts. We got to remember, we were adding, once again, in this low right around here from like 95 to 98. We got that big pop for like a 100% move. I had a lot of size, guys. I was pretty transparent with exactly how many contracts I had. I trimmed down to 5. Those contracts are still, they're doing all right. You know, I'm a little bit down on them, but I still have the opportunity to add. That's why I took those Junes. But this is an interesting setup now where we didn't quite fill the lower gap here, 81.49. And honestly, I don't quite want it to get there. I would actually prefer if this just stayed strong near these highs here. And really what I want to see happen is this flag, and I want to see this end up popping through, because we have, it's kind of weird, it's like gapception, right? Where we have a gap from the most recent earnings from here to where we're currently at, and then we have this gap down here that we didn't quite fill as well from the previous earnings. So really what I would like to see us do is pop above 90.90 and 92.68 and just turn this area into support. I think this is so huge that we turn this into support, and eventually I would like to see us claim a higher low against the top of this as a progression gap, right, and just base this, and I think that would be a good entry then to kind of add into shares and then add into those June contracts, right? Because you got to think, if we just add here without turning this into resistance, we could have sellers overhead that just kind of overpower this and starts to shove it down, and then we could really start to trickle down and trade down into 81.49 and fulfill the gap down here, and that would be pretty bad, especially if you're adding a ton of size here, right? Just so the overall move from there to here be about 8.42%, just that given range. You know, it's just better to be smart. We're kind of in like a purgatory range where we're not technically super bullish yet. We haven't really reclaimed an old support, or I guess like a gap as support, and even claiming the earnings candle high right here, right? This is kind of like our new footprint. We haven't even gotten above that. So we still have to chisel our way above some sellers, turn resistance into support. Otherwise, right, we can kind of just assume this could just still slow bleed down to 81.49. If that happens, it's still not the end of the world, right? I think this is a good share add down here, and then adding into those Junes and maybe then rolling that into even further, right? This is still a lucrative opportunity. But as of now, for all the people that are kind of asking questions about this one, I'm just waiting. I think that's the best thing to do. 90.90 to 92.68. If we can just reclaim that resistance, yes, I will be adding to the Junes. I'll be adding heavy into the shares as well. And what I'll be looking for is a move back up to 103.90 to fill the most recent earnings gap. And then from there, I mean, we can start to add some of our levels again, right? I mean, this would be a pretty big spot once again that it holds above 95.77. This level should look familiar. And we'd want to just kind of hold this range as support again. And then ideally, we get that breakout above 114.80. But this chart is very much still intact. I've talked a lot about SOXL. And how I really don't think that these semis are done, right? We've talked a lot about kind of like the volume anomaly that we saw as this broke clearly through this little lower high here. We had a lower high, right, higher low, ripped out through. We kind of pulled back and retested, and we had this crazy anomaly print from August, right, where we had some of our highest volume that we've seen since the low back here in of 2022. And right, obviously each one is kind of decreasing in volume, but so is the spread. There's not really an intent to sell this lower. We're getting very, very tight and compressed with our monthly candles. Obviously, take a look at the weekly. This thing is just getting so tight, guys. I don't know what's going to break this thing out, but it looks pretty good. I don't, you know, like I've been kind of flirting around with like LRCX. You guys know I still have some Junes of this one. Pretty much the same story, right? The monthly is retesting an old monthly high from back here for the first time. Same thing where we had kind of like an anomaly print, although much less volume than SOXL, but kind of the same candlestick formation, right? And then look at the spread of the last 2 months. We have earnings coming up. I think it's the end of January. I don't know why that said January 2nd. Yeah, so January 22nd. This chart, Like I said, guys, it looks weird, man. This thing looks crazy, especially with all the accumulative lows that were happening against that monthly high. Obviously acting as support now, but we've seen a lot of the high volume come at the low without a real low really coming in, kind of incremental lower lows against that, with it kind of getting back above at the end of each week or each month. It's just a crazy, crazy look, guys. They were obviously kind of big accumulating very large amounts prior to the split here. They did split, so they control a lot of the inventory. So I could definitely see this being a candidate for markup, but I still like MU the most. I don't know. I don't know. This thing just looks crazy, guys. And if we take a look at like the monthly as well, this thing doesn't look any different than what it looked like in August. So I still very much love this chart. If you guys need to go back, I gave the full explanation, but I just went through pretty much every time frame and kind of the thesis behind this as well. So hopefully that helps. Okay, I also started RIVN shares. The reason I'm starting shares with some of these, right, is just because they are in nasty downtrends. I'll talk about AMD shortly as well, because it has been pretty much consistent lower highs. This is no different, but we did see a nice change of character. We kind of got this cup and handle formation that's now being built out. Clearly, though, lower highs as I have drawn out here with this trend line. If we can snap kind of like the subjective trend line aspect, so we break above this, I definitely think that we could see some buying step in on that trend line break, because a lot of people do trade like that, or we get that nice move to 1886. Obviously, I want to see the fulfillment back up to like 23 and 21. Honestly, shares are like just the pathway for that, right? It's an easier hold versus like multiple rips and then a higher low with that pullback and having to endure that, maybe like a reaccumulation. I just don't want to have to deal with the other variables coming from the Greeks, right? So I'd rather just trade shares here. But right, I should go to the weekly. The weekly looks pretty damn good, right? Like we had kind of this the support that was back here, right, from like August. Clear bottom here. We sold through that. We did retest. We made a lower low. But this is still a pretty nice little range that we had here, right? It's still a higher low compared to the low from like April of 2024. Spread got really tight, right? Clearly somewhat of an accumulation here, right? Because it did result in no new low. It popped, of course, and then it reclaimed back above the support here. And that's where it's really, really important that we broke through that and we're pulling back in a pretty mitigated fashion. I will say this last weekly candle from December 16th wasn't the best, but it did close pretty neutral, right? It was a doji, and then obviously last week being the shorter week, I'm not putting too much into this, but it did close above, right? And just this general range has been an interesting spot for a while, right? It's not just this spot here, right? It's clearly kind of like a big rejection focal point from the earnings candle, right? The week of the 11th of November, right? And then if we kind of zoom back out, you guys can see this was a big spot back here. This was a big spot back here, right? So it's kind of been a major, major line in the sand for RIVN for a very long time, right? If I extend this out, you guys can see that a little bit better. And it looks like it kind of just broke out, right, on some decent volume, and it's now holding above. I just felt like this was a good opportunity to take those shares. EV sector is obviously hot, and I think Tesla is kind of cooling down, but we could see some relative strength here and see some kind of move. Like I said, I would like to see this get through that trend line, but first it needs to get through like this 1470 gap and then kind of make a new high here. But this chart does look constructive. I'm probably just going to keep my stops underneath like that 1296 spot if it starts to break under with some good volume and has like I would say a strong trajectory in terms of volume and the spread of the candles towards 1196. I'll stop out of this one. It wouldn't be that big of a loss. It'd be roughly, well, my average is like right around here, like 1330, so it'd be about a 10% loss, which isn't crazy, right? I don't think that's anything super drastic, but yeah, I'm definitely looking to kind of hold this out and see if we can get some kind of move up to 1886 and ultimately over, I think, a period of time, 2194 to 2310. But this was just a shares play that I alerted in the Discord, and just something that I'm still actively watching. I still like potential ads if we can kind of open up around here. But yeah, definitely still a downtrend, so I'm not interested in any options. LULU is more of an update, guys, but this chart still looks fantastic. It's just a little bit hard, right? This isn't a very liquid name, especially from an options perspective. You guys can clearly see like it trades about 1 million per day, so it's very illiquid, and even more so on the options chain. So I don't really feel too comfortable going super heavy into this one, but I love the chart still, right? I still think that this has a potential for a big payout. Obviously, holding the peg, relative strength to the market sell-off that we saw during OPEX and kind of some of the other trickle downs that we've seen. So really strong name. The daily obviously had a little bit of slippage under 377, but if we take a look at the weekly, very much just a wick and a close back above. Last week during Christmas, right, we obviously opened right around the close and just stayed right above 377. Nice little inside week here as well. And I did say, like, I expected this one to just catch up to the EMAs. It's not quite there just yet, so I wouldn't be surprised if we have like another week of consolidation with this being a shorter week as well. But as long as it holds above 377, and hell, honestly, I might even just kind of risk like that 366 spot. I don't think that's the worst idea. I still think this looks good. Maybe like a couple strategic adds onto this one, maybe like 1 or 2 extra. Now, I'm not going to exceed like 10 though. I definitely don't see that happening. The spread on these is pretty ridiculous. I think it's about 25 to 30 between the bid and ask. So definitely want to try to keep a very light amount of size on this one, because if we do start to see a sell-off and those people start to kind of drop down towards the bid, these can lose value very quickly. So I just want to play this one smart. Honestly, I was even thinking too, this could be a share play, but it is kind of expensive, right? 377 per share. Obviously, the returns would be nice, about a 24% move. If we can get this all the way up to 469-ish, but I don't really feel like paying that much for shares. So I'm probably just going to keep this light size and just see how this goes. But I just wanted to give an update on this one, that it does still look very healthy, holding the peg, swept underneath 377, and a really nice close here with an inside week above 377. So just need to see how this one goes. Risk is right there, so I don't really feel like this is a crazy risky play, and it still has a lot of upside potential as well. So really excited to see how this one plays out. Okay, this one should look familiar. Nike. I obviously took this going into earnings. Once again, we traded it a couple times prior. I've talked a lot about this chart, and the more I stare at it, the more it looks like a Wyckoff accumulation. I'll kind of show you guys. It hasn't played itself out just yet. Excuse me, but it looks almost identical, right? I mean, obviously, the sell climax was back here. We've already identified that when it's sold down, that it really, in context is everything, right? A lot of people are probably going to be like, how do you know this isn't just going to result in a new low? Well, we've talked about what this gray zone is, this little gap area. This is very hard to find. I think for a lot of people it was, because when I was looking at the weekly, and I'll go back, but it pulled back essentially into this COVID 2020 gap. This is really what sparked my interest when we first took this. And when I saw this, right, it gapped down because of earnings, and it stalled out for a couple weeks, right? If we go to the weekly chart, right, when it stalled down for about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks, right, where it just had this stopping power, and it didn't go any lower despite the high volume sell-off from earnings. And then it had that big breakout. It pulled back and based the top of the earnings gap here, and then it resulted in a new high. It pulled back down, right? We kind of had a higher low once again, kind of a lower high. And then for the most part, we've sold back down on pretty low volume here, right? And I'll kind of go back to the daily just to show you guys. Let me zoom this out, right? And it all kind of makes sense, right? If we kind of, and you guys should know these levels by now by heart, but this was essentially the gap down this little blue line. We broke out. We didn't have enough inventory to continue higher. We pulled back and retested the gap. We broke out higher again into this. This is the gap fill that we're kind of targeting, right? This 95 spot, 94 spot, whatever. And then it pulled down again, kind of got like a lower high here. And then for the most part, we've sold back down an extremely low volume, which tells me that this isn't really selling. This is people just bidding back down into this old accumulation zone, right? They're kind of looking to buy lower, and the market is facilitating price back to those orders. And once they get enough of the inventory collected, they can then mark the price up by selling a mass amount of their orders higher, and the market will gravitate towards those. Typically, we need some kind of catalyst. Obviously, earnings is usually the best one for that. But yeah, I mean, this is looking very compelling, right? Where we have kind of like our automatic reaction. We kind of had the secondary test here. We broke out, we pulled back down, and this looks like kind of like our secondary test or our sell test and as a sign of weakness, which it's really not, right? We kind of know that by the volume. And then it broke out again, and we created this little range, right? Now I'll kind of delete some of our stuff now, but we've created this little consolidation zone here where I think that we could get one more breakdown, right back towards this low here. I would actually love if this happened, if it kind of swept underneath 70, right, and created kind of like that spring, right, where we end up getting a mass liquidation of all the remaining longs that are in this zone, where we get one massive footprint candle, something very similar to this or this here, and it gets back above, right? If it can kind of create a pathway where it sweeps under, gets back above, and we have a clear volume print here, I definitely think that we get this here, right, where we get, and I didn't draw it, so that's my bad, where we get something like this, where it reclaims back above. Oh shit, I did the wrong one. Oh, my bad. Where we get back above, it pulls back and reclaims that spot, which would be our test. Then we get back above here, we come here, right, and then we start to build out what, in my opinion, would be kind of like an LPS, either against 79.86, which was this old high here, that $80 psych level everybody was looking to go above, which clearly, right, was a big spot because it swept everybody through that, right? But I think we could get a really nice entry again if it can just come down to like 70, 75, sweep everybody, reclaim it, or if we miss that boat, right, if it can push back up, give us some kind of LPS entry off of 75. Even then, right, I do think this could take a little bit of time. It might take into next earnings right around March, but we could get another entry if it rips from earnings and it jumps the creek over the automatic reaction, right? I'll zoom this out, where we can get a really, really clean kind of SOS, right off of the spot where we jump the creek, and we can kind of pull back and hold 85. I think this would be beautiful because we have a gap here as well that I have labeled right here, right, where we can just turn this gap into support, which would be a really nice gap and go. And I showed a couple friends of mine. A gap and go is pretty simple, guys. Google isn't like like a jump the creek situation, but it had this really easy gap here, right, with a screen line where it was a resistance. We ended up kind of pushing up to this. We broke out above it, we pulled back and we retested, and we just went, right? So we gapped above, pulled back, retested, and then went. I think Nike, and I'm kind of speaking way ahead, right? This is going to take a little bit of time, but I think Nike can pull the same situation up here, right? Where we can gap above 85, pull back and retest this, turn this into a support. This gap has a lot of, a lot of open ground above this, and we can really rally up towards 89. That's the top of that gap, and then really start to push towards 90, and then complete this gap here at like 94, right? So kind of like long-term speaking, but just something that I want to put on everybody's radar. That I'm either bullish if we can get like an LPS above 80. Obviously, if we go lower, I think the LPS would be off 75. But if we do start to trade lower, we break 70. I don't think it's anything to panic about. I just think that's an opportunity to look for that spring, right? Nobody should be in this now. This is just kind of like a fresh chart, but I definitely think this is setting up a really nice accumulation. And yeah, there's two ways to go about this. I'll repeat it one more time. Either a break in base above 80, and if it pulls back and holds, I think we can get a trend up to 85, where we should either trend up into 85 and hold above that, or we get some kind of catalyst that breaks us through that creek and we can kind of hold that. Or my preferred method, right, would be a break underneath 70, 75, a reclaim back above. We get some kind of volume anomaly, right, where we have very high volume and it ends up becoming like a weekly sweep, a monthly sweep, a daily sweep, whatever. Yeah, and it just reclaims, and we can have a clean entry off of 70, 75, risk whatever the low is, and then we have a really clean entry to kind of let this trade all the way up to 94. So this is going to be a big watch for me. I think this and AMD are going to be pretty big watches if they can just kind of behave the way I want. But yeah, definitely keep this on your radar. Intel kind of has the same look, just a little bit, right? It's not perfect. I'll have to redo this chart. I know Pat from the Discord, shout out to you, Pat, and Roger, you guys have been all over the Wyckoff stuff, but I haven't been keeping as much or paying as much of attention to this one. But it's very similar, right? Very, very similar, where this could sweep the low and then kind of start at the reclaim and then start trending up to 29. They have their earnings coming up as well on the 23rd, so I actually wouldn't mind, and I might have an alert underneath this low here, just to kind of see if it can do that prior. But very similar look to Nike, and shit, man, people got to wear clothes. That's all I know, man. This is a very undervalued stock right now, as you guys can tell, right? I mean, just a couple poor. I wouldn't even say they've had like one bad earnings report, but just some bad instances with a great stock is usually a great opportunity. So yeah, this is a big watch for me going into like 2025. All right, similar kind of thing, 2025, I'm looking at AMD. I've talked about this one a lot, where I think this is going to be a big outperformer, and sentiment aligns, the chart kind of aligns, But I did take a short on Thursday here, got like a 20% gain. I took a loss on Friday as well. I thought we can get like a continuation off of this candle here to go underneath 121 again and come to that mysterious 115 level that I have. I will not tell you guys why I have that, but just know it was just a big level that I had. And I think we got close enough, honestly. And I'm fighting for, however much downside. It's like, 9% versus the potential adding in this range and then trying to, get as much upside as I can, which I do think we can get a 52% return on this. But it does look pretty good here, so I think I'm just going to kind of abandon whatever's left for the short side that I'm trying to capture with options and really start to just look at the share side of things, right? Now, why am I taking shares? Same thing as RIVN, same thing as a lot of these riskier names that are in clear downtrends where we have a high, lower high, lower high, lower high. We're just consistently putting in lower highs. But I do, honestly, and I've talked about this with SOXL, SMH, a lot of the semis, I do think this name has a lot of potential. And it kind of starts with this 121.83. Obviously, we kind of swept underneath it. We broke back above, and we're pulling back onto this. We got some good volume on Friday here. Once again, guys, it is kind of, I would say, not irrelevant, but it's kind of whatever at this point because it was a shorter week. But it did reclaim it. It kind of has like a nice look where this could be a higher low. I don't mind ads kind of in this range here from like 115 to like, I don't know, 121. It's a 5% range where I will start a position here, 100%. But this thing really starts to look good, in my opinion, if we can pop back above this old kind of level where we broke structure at 132. We can get above 132. This is an old support where I think we can push above and overextend just a tiny bit. Get up to this 136 spot, which is this gap. And then I think the real test is if we can hold this as support here. If we can, I definitely think that we fill the gap. We might be able to kind of hold the gap of support. And I really think that's what starts the trend back up to 153. And then obviously the gap fulfillment at 166. And then we have another gap that's still unfulfilled right around 176/177, and even one higher at 208, right? 206. But yeah, this name is definitely piquing my interest. We're retesting, and we did it already, right? I'm not going to say that we haven't. Kind of this old lower high, right, where we had this range up here. We kind of pulled back at a higher low. We broke out. We obviously pulled back into this spot. We kind of pull our fibs off of this zone here, right, and kind of snap it back to the top. Oh, it's not letting me do it. Right, we're kind of right in that discounted area, right? We already touched it. I will say that. So there is, potential that we go lower, but I do like the 115 spot. I like how we're kind of in this discounted range from our swing low to our swing high. Things are just kind of aligning, right? Sentiment's kind of there where people don't really like this name. It reminds me a lot of 2023/early 2024 when everyone hated Tesla, everyone hated Elon. And if you guys have been in here a while, I was all over Tesla, guys. I was like one of the only big bulls that was talking about it. You guys can literally go back on I swear, if anyone wants me to post it, I have the receipts. I was huge on this chart. I was like looking the long back here. I was bullish back here, and my targets were like a little bit shorter than what I thought it would go to, of course. But I was looking for this to go to 300. I was looking for it to go to, I think it was like 250 or something like that. Obviously, kind of got shaken up going into the elections because it felt like a risky trade at that point. But guys, this is literally setting up exactly like Tesla. And obviously, I want to approach this a little bit different and get the less risky side of it first, which I should have done on Tesla a lot more of because I do have shares of Tesla, but I should have been more aggressive. And I don't want to let that slip away here. I'm okay with a little bit of drawdown, but like anywhere between 115 to 121, I want to start grabbing shares on this thing. And then really, like I said, if we can get back above 132, that's when I'll start entertaining the options because I feel like we're now kind of within, we reclaimed the external range, which is 121. We're now back within this nice internal break of structure that we had. We could potentially turn this old support into support once again. We can use this gap as kind of like a gauge, like how strong sellers are. If we fill this gap, are they going to kind of sell it back down? Is it going to be another lower high? Are buyers willing to step in and turn this into support? There's a lot of good confluence here that will give us a good gauge on this. But yeah, if 132 can turn into support, I will 100% start looking for like 170 calls. Obviously, with some time behind them, I can't really say exactly when, but that would be kind of the time I'm going to start looking at options or leaps for these, and I think they will pay out. But yeah, this is going to be a big 2025 stock. I think Nike's another one of those. MU's another one. Roku's obviously a big one. Even though Roku's a little bit more extended, I think these are kind of like in their infancy stages between Nike, MU now, and AMD. So that's pretty much it. I'll touch on SPY really quickly as well. There's a couple. I don't know who's on. I can't remember his name on here, but he was like talking shit when I literally said that I wanted it to kind of hit the gap here, push up to 604. I thought this would actually kind of result in the 575 or 576 gap. It is what it is. Kind of gap trapped everybody. But I wanted it to come up to 604 to like 600, right? And I wanted to see a lower high, and then obviously have it kind of sell back down as a continuation to fill the election gap. I guess I'll just talk about it. I went long on this one, really because I do think that we kind of had the lower high potential continuation here. A lot of people were looking for the head and shoulders. I think it fakes people out, kind of pushes things back up into this spot here, and then I think we could either get the continuation again off of this, because you got to remember, they don't sell everything at once, guys. I talked about this here. I had it. Where is it? I don't know if I'm going to be able to pull it up, but right here, right, we saw those like crazy dark pool prints come in at the bid. So buyers or sellers were selling, right, and then buyers were looking to put their orders down here to reaccumulate the lows, and this resulted in a pretty nasty flush where we really were kind of stuck in a range. We weren't breaking higher. We were seeing anything that got bought off of this 603 spot get sold back off at the highs, and it was just a small distribution that ended up coming into a massive distribution where everything got unloaded here at 604. It sold all the way down, and obviously that takes part with buyers looking to bid down here as well. It's a two-party system, right? So they were bidding here while simultaneously selling up here, and that helps facilitate price even quicker. And then remember, we had the gap trap here. We're now pushing up on, once again, kind of like lower volume. I will say it again, it was a shorter week with the holidays, but we pushed up, we kind of sold down. I can see this trapping people, and I do want to kind of point this out because this has been pretty handy. My screen might freeze. We had this, right, where sellers are looking to sell at 601.3. Now it does say bearish, and yes, they are looking to sell, but you don't sell low, guys, you sell high, right? So price will facilitate towards these sellers, and they are at 601.3, and there's been a lot more since this. This only showed the most recent screenshot at 36 prints for about 5.5 million, or the equivalent of 151,000 shares. But I could see this kind of pushing up back into this lower high here, right? And then obviously I can see more selling happen. This is null and void if this kind of pushes up and then bases this lower high, right? And then I can see this pushing back up for a higher high. That's how the market works. But as of right now, I could definitely see this pushing back up to 601.30 and then potentially continuing down. Maybe it even kind of like consolidates off 601.30 and then kind of pushes down. But I do think that this can come down all the way to 576 by, I want to say, OPEC, so January 17th, maybe into the inauguration. I can't really put an exact date on it, but I do think that we come down lower. And then once we fill this gap of 576, I think it comes down to finding what's relatively strong, what's relatively weak, and just looking at the overall chart structure and seeing what we want to trade. But yeah, on Friday I did alert that I took some calls on this one. So ideally this can kind of get a nice push up, or it kind of opens flat and then trends up throughout the week into 601.30. I'll close, maybe keep a runner just in case that we end up kind of breaking above 601.30 and basing it, like I said. And in that case, I'll look to hold this for a higher high. But yeah, this thing has definitely a head and shoulder look, even though I don't really trade that way. Yeah, this thing looks pretty crazy. But it's just all about kind of finding relative strength versus relative weakness once this ends up kind of doing what it's going to do, whether it's a higher high or it ends up selling for the gap fill. And if they can stabilize, you know, I would kind of look towards the market leaders at that point. So like Tesla coin, some of those would kind of jump to the top of the list. But yeah, we'll have to see what ends up happening this week. Short week with the New Year's coming up on Wednesday. So it's just kind of a read and react market right now, guys, and kind of letting time play out with our contracts. And obviously having time behind us is very helpful. There's a reason I'm looking at shares. There's a reason I'm looking at some more passive takes on things. I definitely think that we're going to have some wealth building opportunities, and that's what I've been talking about, some value plays. But yeah, that's really it. No real update other than that, guys. So I'm going to jump off. Glad to be back. I'm excited to kind of take on the beginning of the new year. And yeah, let's get this thing going. See you guys soon.